what I would like to start with is, it cuts a little bit off across everyone's talk, but that's really something I hadn't thought about myself until I sat here and listened to each of you, and Stefan talking about iconic design, and Stephen to some extent on scale as well. And the question is, it's not a new problem for architecture, and as architects I'm sure you spend much more time thinking about this than we do, but who pays attention actually to design? There's this problem that we want people to be inspired and learn by our spaces, but I can, in my own personal experience, I spend, most of my friends aren't in the design industry. A lot of them, like a lot of people at Transsolar, are nerds, and they're not focused on design, and they don't pay attention to the spaces that they inhabit or the world that they interact with. It's not even on their radar, and no matter how inspiring or great we make spaces, which we all appreciate, and most of the people in the room do, a lot of the world just isn't paying attention. And how do we grab their attention, or do we not need to worry about that? And whoever wants to go first can take a start.
Well, I think, honestly, good design is perceived by people. Consciously or unconsciously, I can't say, but do we feel comfortable in a space or not? It has to do, the problem is more that a lot of people, or we are, used to very bad design and take it for granted. But, yeah, look around the city. But if we really, I think people, even if they are not educated, and someone mentioned education, actually, it is a thing that has to be educated in an earlier age, also the quality. It's a quality issue. But generally, I think people do appreciate good design. They do appreciate what they would then say interesting buildings. They do appreciate a good space and a good room. Maybe not consciously, but I would say they see the difference. And it's important.
I think someone like, I love this biography of Steve Jobs, this Isaacson biography of Steve Jobs. And I'm from Seattle, so Bill Gates' father was born in my hometown, so I'm supposed to be supporting Bill Gates. But they were always fighting, right? Gates and Jobs. But Jobs would say, the problem with Bill Gates, the Gates have no taste. They don't appreciate good design. And that's actually, the legacy of Microsoft and Apple is really about Jobs' obsession with design. The fact is, it did win in the end. Even though this biography is really an interesting one because Jobs was like my father. My father was a craftsman, and he said, and I was doing sheet metal work as a kid, 14, 15, underneath the house, putting ductwork in, right? And my father said, you have to do it well because in your heart, you're going to know that the craft, that you did it really well. And I was working next to another guy who would just hang the duct tape sloppy and just stick it on there, But at the end of the day, feeling like you did it well. And Jobs was like that. The sort of pride in good design, and in that biography it talks about how they, in the first Lisa computer, you got one of those, right? Greg had one of those.
I had a 2+.
Yeah. The people who worked on it all signed their names inside the case. So no one could see that, but the fact is they put their spirit into it, the craft was in there, the love of making it well and good design. So, I think good design is infectious, it's something that if you believe in it, the truth is people do appreciate it, otherwise things of good design wouldn't succeed so well in the world, in the end. So I think it's about teaching as well, and we're both teachers, and I think bringing that to the students, bringing that obsession to the students, and bringing it to the public via the students is also another thing. If you're making lectures, nowadays you make a lecture, if it's good and it's on YouTube, 50,000 people will see it. So, I think that the things that we can do as teachers is a very important ingredient in terms about good design. The most difficult thing is what is good. Right?
Sure, right.
So, especially in the art world, there's a big argument, kind of bad is good, right?
Let me shift the question then a little bit, because it leads into my other big question of, and the challenge with architecture as compared to consumer products is that it's everything, almost everything is individual, yet there's things happening on a massive scale. And how do we make, it's one thing to make good design on a technical standpoint, such as more geothermal and so on. Most people can copy that, and for me, it was really encouraging to hear that modern green is copying like the design from linked hybrid and so on. But the question is, how can people also copy the design elements if we look to the design itself for people to inspire? How does it make you as designers feel? Do you want people to copy your design ideas and try to implement them, or does it worry you that they will do it wrong? Because it's a big difference versus the phone, which is designed once and produced millions of times.
Right, architecture is specific to site and circumstance.
totally. Right.
That's something you shouldn't be transferring from one site.
But are they
to the
doing
next.
that in China, do you think?
Yeah,
Or trying
and
to?
very bad copies.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's depressing, okay? The copying of image is not something inspiring. The copying of using the geothermal and using those systems and learning, that whole dimension can be positive, very positive, but the copying of the image completely misuses it.
What you want people to learn from is how you think and what the process of design is, rather than copying a specific object or knocking off something. It's really how to, I think, inspire people to think about cities and think about architecture and think about object making, not make another object.
I disagree with both of you guys. I mean, I think, Stefan, when you said the iconic, I'm not so sure if we need icons, but I really believe, I know my kids and in Southern California, the last master narrative is ecology, and it has been since the 70s. I mean, the kids aren't taught about God, they're not taught about science. What they're taught about is ecology. And they really want to know what it looks like, and they want to know what the language is. And I'm shocked, actually, that there's not yet a language of our day. And I think once we hit it, it'll go everywhere. But I really think, in my experience, if you tell somebody a Prius is a good car, everybody goes Prius. You show up with a V8 BMW, and you really take a lot of shit for it. So I think people really want to know what good design is, and I think it can't be the responsibility of any one architect or designer. I think the world is asking for the language right now, and we should supply it.
Yeah, that's what, iconic is the wrong word. I do agree. But so the leading example that people could identify with also, the language, but also, see, the Prius will never be a leading example because it looks like shit.
Yep.
You know?
It's tough to get attached to your Prius.
Very
That's
difficult.
the problem. To him, it looks good.
No, it doesn't.
No.
No.
He's bad.
No, but I hate the way these things look too, so I'm not, I
Yeah,
really
but
think the
that's a
world.
good example. That's a really good. The Prius made it even though it looks bad.
Yeah.
You know, and imagine that thing would have looked great,
Yep.
and even a Mustang fan could drive it. Imagine how successful something like that would be, and that's a little bit what we are missing. That in architecture, we have the two fractions, buildings look like Jute bags sometimes, sort of. They have to be the Birkenstock in architecture to be really valuable green architecture. And on the other side, we have architecture that are a bit pretentious sometimes. They do their architecture and then attach something to it and say, look, we are green, we have LEED. So I think still the language, I like more language than icon. It's something that really, like, the high tech, the structuralism, all these ideas of Bauhaus developed out of an Siam, out of an ideology. They developed an architecture. This is a step we are still missing.
No, and it was industry and culture and consumers. And I think our field is looked to do that. I mean, you don't get it from the product designers at Apple. I mean, in the history, it's always the architects that get that language, and then all the other fields follow it. And I really do think it's our responsibility to figure out what the language of.
Yeah, but it's like you're calling for a new international style, and I think that's a wrong-headed idea. The world is a very different place in different climates and different cultures, and I think that architecture, especially architecture, needs to be beginning from a certain site, a certain circumstance, a culture, a place, a climate. They're all
Totally
different.
agree.
It's, we have one of the great examples of the international style right down the street here. We stopped at the Wiesenhof, right? Fantastic. Le Corbusier's 5 points of architecture, more exemplified in that little building. Everything is there. The pilotis, the strip window, everything, the free plan. But that was a moment that's passed. There's not going to be, and I make this prediction, there will never be a grand narrative in architecture again. The world is too complex, and I think rightly so. It should be individually, each architectural work needs to be individually studied and given its value in its place. What you build in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, isn't what you're going to build in Canada. It's just, it shouldn't be. So how are you going to expect some kind of a language? It's something that needs to be uniquely figured out for each circumstance. That's why it's so different than product design. Architecture is a very different thing.
Stefan, briefly, and then I have one more question.
I didn't call for a new international style. That was a different ideology, which failed eventually.
Not so failed, but it...
Yeah, it was
The rent
possible
is
because energy was cheap. You could
Right.
build everything everywhere because energy was cheap. Yeah, but I'm looking for an idea, and the idea could be each culture different, each place different, and so on. But I'm still looking for a unifying idea of that, because I think total individualism that everybody does develop individually on each space of the world, I don't think it's going to work, personally.
So I'd like to shift to just one more question.
I just want to speak to that. I think that the unifying idea is the integration of how things work and then how things look and feel. I think that's the integration that I would look for that would give unique expression in a different cultural and climate
Maybe that
context.
leads into my question, which is really about the user experience within the building, because that's what I hear a little bit as the answer as well, that your idea of your relationship to the building, that's what I'm so personally interested in, is shifting our relationship and experience and interacting with the building. And Bruce, you talked about that with Manitoba Hydro, and Stefan, it's in a lot of your project as well, and I'm curious, do you feel that the users really get it and that it really is changing? And not for any of you in your projects, do you feel that the users that are inhabiting those spaces have a different relationship with the building, which changes their relationship with the world and their environmental awareness?
Well, I don't think it's in your religion, but we noticed when we did the Gensheim building, which is now 12 years ago, that the impact of the building was more not the building itself, but the user behavior also at home and so on. It became a conscious issue for the people. But that had also a lot to do with the behavior of the client, because they did education. It was at the beginning, they had to explain the building to the users and to make them aware of it, and that had a huge impact on the overall behavior. So I think the impact was sort of an initial impact.
Well, I think that for hydro, it changed the way people go to and from work. I mean, now 75% of the people are taking public transit, which is really a kind of revolution in that city. And they're also going out into the city. You know, when they're in the suburbs, they just eat in the cafeteria, drive to the parking lot, go in the building, do your work, get into your car, go to your suburban house. And I think now there are changes. You know, it's hard to get to unless you really talk to the people who are working in the building. And we do. And I think it's really important to carry on that conversation with them, because it's their building. They operate it. They know what's going on in it. And they live it.
I also think people's expectations of what buildings should do are far in excess of what we provide them with. And I mean, that's an opportunity, I think. I mean, people expect to have a relationship with their environment, with digital technology, that the buildings haven't yet delivered. And if it's intelligent, I think it's a really big opportunity for us.
But I think that potential is there. It's
Yeah.
just untapped. I don't know, Stephen, do you have anything to say about your projects and user experience and interaction?
Well, in China, especially in China, I think that the hope to make chunks of cities, you know, I mean, we can't do that in America. No one will commission you for that big a piece. But the hope to make, like in the linked hybrid, we thought of first and foremost trying to reduce the amount of, you know, trips across the city. So living, working, cultural activities all in one place, and that's the way it's working so far. There's offices there, there's living there, there's Cinematheque there, there's cafes, you know, and I think that becomes a kind of an urban hope, you know, that at certain scales that the architecture really does affect the fabric of a city, and I think that's something, you know, beyond what it looks like. It's functioning at a different level, and I think one of the interesting things is the notion of building cities from scratch. The Chinese are doing it. I think we could do that in America. We could certainly do it in Canada, and you know, and then, you know, just imagine that the entire infrastructure could be conceived, you know, by Matthias Schuler, right, Matthias?
It's happening, right? So we have a lot more on cities later today, so we'll get to explore that topic. I think we're out of time right now. This was fantastic, and I want to encourage everyone during the break, don't forget to participate. Matthias is raising his hand.
Can I have the tone?
Yeah.
Yes, thanks. I just want to react on one point Stephen had in respect of he didn't like the maximizing impact. Now, my question...
No, I questioned it.
You questioned it, okay, in a certain way you said you're not afraid about, how you said, the marginalization of good architecture, that you may even that it's only 2%. My question is...
It's always been like that.
Yeah, but the question is now how we are facing the problem and in a certain way, I'm really worried in a certain way that if we are not increasing our impact, we can talk about beauty, but this planet will be gone. So are we dying in beauty because we are not afraid about the marginalization, or are we trying to maximize our impact?
And to turn it the other way, we can become totally technocratically obsessed with some positive thoughts and forget the poetry. And then what do we have? You know, a planet of nerds with no taste and no poetry. And I think, you know, this is a very key point. And that's the point, I'm glad you brought it up, because that's why I want to bring that up, because we can't just accept this maximize impact as a fait accompli. We have to question it. You know, I saw you say the planet will be gone. Well, it's going to be gone anyway. You know, the sun is going to go out.
Okay,
so,
but that's
I mean,
so
in
long.
the end, we're all going to die. But we better have a joyful life with poetry, because I think that's what architecture brings. That's what good design brings. You know, I think these dimensions are in...
Yeah, but Stephen, this is not responsible. If you said, we have a joyful life, and spend it, and then the planet goes down the alley, and then the rest generation, which are even not yet born, we don't give them the chance to experience poetry.
Right.
So we still have a responsibility.
Look, you've converted me.
I know.
I mean, I'm trying to do cities of 500,000 now. You know,
I think the real question here is that we all agree, and most people in this room, that those two goals are not irreconcilably at odds with one another, but it's very difficult to do it. And therefore, we can only do a small volume of projects, and that's the problem, because how do people reconcile that? So we could talk a lot more.
Spinoza said, good things are difficult. That's
Exactly.
why they're so rare.
Yeah.
You know.
So
That's a good.
yeah, let's continue the discussion during the break.
Another German philosopher.
So there's coffee. There's coffee outside.